Hey boys and girls, welcome to another episode of How I Screwed This Up, DIY style. Hey, so as you can see, we added a new container. So we're officially going to start phase 2. As you know, if you've been watching the videos, you'll notice that I had a phase 1 basically, which was this container. And I was a big hurry to get this one done because I needed a place to stay and live. And so I built this one out real quick and got some water to it, electricity to it, so I can throw the bed in there and have a wash machine, dryer, and refrigerator and all that stuff. It's really cramped in there. You know, it's hard to live in a 8-foot by 40-foot container with, you know, full-size refrigerator, wash machine, dryer, you know, pantry, bathroom, shower, full-size bed. But so, welcome to phase 2. So I like to talk about today on phase 2 is the do's and don'ts and the things that I've learned. So when I'm going to do things a little differently with phase 2. Phase 2 will include this container and the one that we're going to put right here. We're going to put 2 more containers here. Well, 1 more here. There's 2 here, and then we're going to put 2 more up on top. So this container is different from this container. And how they're different is there are different grades of quality of containers. I'm not going to go into them real depthly. Of course, there's a brand new ones that you have one trip. And then there's one called cargo, they call it cargo ready, I guess, cargo quality. And then this one is what they call wind and weather quality. And don't go with the low. You know, I paid $3,200 for this one. I paid $3,500 for this one, and this one is better than that one. And the one over there on the other side where I have my tools on, I paid $2,500 for that one. But that was pre-pandemic, so, and that was real cheap. The problem with buying what they call it the weather, rain and wind ones, they rust, they got lots of rust, they got a lot of dents, they got lots of patches in the ceiling and on the side, and they always leak, and then you got to fix the leaks, and you never can fix the leaks, and it's just a pain. So this one here, I live just outside, about 100 miles north of Houston, so I can pick up good quality containers out of Houston relatively cheap, and I have my own flatbed so I can haul them myself. But these are the do's and don'ts and the things I want you to think about. If you're getting into this container project, building a container, you got to understand a couple things. Some people think it's cheaper to buy containers and build a house because you already have the thing halfway built because it's a box, and that's not true, because then you got to frame it in the inside or the outside, and you got to insulate it, and by the time you get done building out a container, it's actually more expensive than if you just built something out of steel. To give you an example is the barnuminiums. Most of the time here in Texas, barnuminiums are made out of steel, so they have some I-beams and they have purlings, and then they're skinned. That is got to be the most economic way to build a building, is having some I-beams, some purlings, and skin it and put a concrete flat. That is the cheapest way. This by the time I paid like $700 to put it up on the foundation with the crane, so I've got almost $4,000 by taxes and all that stuff. I've almost got $4,000 into this one, and this one here, I still had to pay, the $700-800 to put it on the foundation there. So, between these two, I've almost got almost $10,000 just in a raw box, not even finished out. So if I'm going to put the third one there, I've got almost $15,000 just in 3 boxes. It is far cheaper. Now, I thought about this. I thought about, instead of putting another container here and another container there, is just put some I-beams across there and I-beams on top, and frame it in like a barnuminium, and you just have one container, and then you have the rest of it's all built out by steel and skinned. That would have been a whole lot cheaper, guys. To build a barnuminium, it's a lot cheaper than doing these containers. Less work as far as labor intensive, and because these things are rusted, you got to get the rust out of it and paint it and all that stuff. It is so much cheaper, so much better just to build your own metal container. If you're going to be building a container home, you want to do it for one reason and one reason only, is because you like the look. You like the industrial look. And don't do it because you're trying to save the planet. They're still making these things, millions of them a year, you know, in China. So you're not doing the ground, you know, environment anything. So if you're gonna, my advice to you, if you're gonna build a container home, don't do it because you think it's cheaper, because it's not. It's cheaper to build it out of steel and start from scratch. And if you decide to go ahead and build a container, I ran into some troubles. Like I said, phase 2, I'm gonna do things differently than I did phase 1. I really love my plasma cutter. Really love my plasma cutter. No doubt. It's faster, better, easier, quieter. It's so much better. But I ran into something I didn't realize, and that's the heat. What happens is when you use a plasma cutter for an extended period of time, you tend to warp the steel. And the problem that I was having when I was cutting out windows with the plasma cutter, what happened is when the thing came all apart and you got this big hole, all this metal, corrugated metal, was all bent out of shape. And so that was because of the heat warping. And then when you go start welding the thing, what do you got? You got heat again. You start warping. On the other side of the container, if you saw my previous episode when I talked about putting the deck on, I took a 3-inch plate, flat bar, and welded up in there. I had the same problem with warping. There's a trick to welding when you're long distances. You don't weld all the way on long distance. You weld a section, you weld here, and you weld here, and you weld here. You do spot welds, and that way it keeps it all straight. When you start putting in, one of the problems that I ran into with these doors is this, between here and here, it's warped. The door actually bows in like this. So when the door shuts, I have these at the bottom, I have these little gaps where bugs and, you know, moisture, both here and here, I have where the door shuts here, but there's a gap at the top and bottom. And that's because the door is warped. Why is the door warped? For several reasons. One, I use a plasma cutter to cut out this panel. As you can see in this container, there's a panel here, and I cut that out. And then I welded that, I think it's 1.5 angle iron, 16th wall, 16th, what do they call it? 16 gauge angle plate coming down, and put the glass on there. When I did all that welding all the way up and down, I just welded it straight down. I didn't spot weld it here and there and then here, and it warped the door. Now the question is, when did I warp the door? Did I warp the door when I plasma cut it, or did I warp it when I welded it? Who knows? But when I start working on this one, I'm gonna do the same. You'll notice I'm gonna make these identical. So I'm gonna keep the bars. So picture this one like this, except 2 bars coming straight down. I want to keep that look. I could probably do it with this one, but I don't want to do it. Anyway, so that's the idea. We're going to cut this all out, and of course I'll be filming it. The other problem that I ran into, for you to keep in mind, I don't know if you can see it, there's a gap, right? Between the two containers coming together, there's a gap right here. And the reason why there's a gap there is because going down the walls, this container here, the walls are warped. They're like this. So when you bring, they're warped like this. So when you bring the two containers together, they're like this. And so, and so what you have to do is you have to push them together. And when you push them together here, you're going to cause the inside to warp inside because you've already put insulation, you know, the foam insulation, especially this one. This has a 2-inch closed cell, and so when you start pushing, when it's bowed, when the outside skin is bowed out, and then you push the two containers together, what are you going to do? You're going to warp the inside, and so it's kind of a little bit of a problem. When we set the container down on the foundation, we couldn't get the container all the way against it because the skin on this container is warped out. Okay, so where this one is newer and it's square, so we have the new container, the newer container is square, the skin is pretty straight, but this skin here has a bow in it. So I'll show you, you'll see here in my time lapse how I ran a chain back from here to here, and then I squeezed them together. And once I squeeze them together, I weld them, and they're good to go. So the other thing is, I want to show you this on these containers. I noticed there's two types of containers. If you look up on this top rail, see it's got a square tubing right here. Okay. On this one, I don't know if you can see it. There's no square tubing. Okay, it's a thin, like a flat bar. So this container here has a flat bar. So when you marry these two containers together, you're going to run a flat bar on top, right? And weld the flat bar, connect them. Sand there. Anyway, and so you have two containers, but they're different. One's got a square tubing and one's got a flat bar. So I don't know how that's going to work out. But when you go and buy multiple containers, make sure you look at the container. In the next episode, you'll see me cut this whole wall out. So the problem is, you start cutting this whole wall out, is you're going to have this top bar is going to either sag or if it's going to go up. I haven't exactly decided how I'm going to do that. Probably I'll put some reinforcements here. But the reason we're going to cut that out is because we're going to put another container right up here against it, and that way you'll have two containers with a big room inside of it, because this will be a kitchen, living room, and pantry eventually. And then they'll have a deck that comes off. Anyway, so pay attention to the thing. The other thing that I noticed I had a problem with, now, I don't know if you can see this, but there's a gap right there. And so I was thinking maybe I screwed up when I built these pylons, these pillars. I thought maybe these pillars were too high or too low and they weren't all level. Well, they're all level within like 1/8 of inch, 1/4 inch of all of them. They're all good. But if you look on the other side, the other pillar, there's the pillar right there. If you look on the other side, it has the same gap here, but the other container is actually welded to that pillar, but this container is not touching this pillar or the other one. So that tells me there's something going on with this pillar, and I'm assuming it's because of that. You can kind of see that this I-beam here is got a 1/4 inch gap here. So guys, in your future, when you're planning this stuff, again, remember I told you the other container has a flat bar on top, and this one has the square tubing. The same principle goes here. This container is not the same as the other container, and so when you start building your pylons or your deal, you can run into having a gap in the pylons pillars here in the middle. You have to compensate because it's not the same height as that one. And I kind of thought that would be a problem. And when I originally planned this thing out, I originally thought that might be of an issue, but it doesn't really make any difference because I can put a spacer there and weld it. Good to go. You got to be happy with working with metal though, right? I mean, you don't take on a project like this with metal and think you're going to build this thing out with wood. No. Guys, if you're going to build a container, think metal. Anyway, that's all for now on this episode. This is going to be a real quick build out. I'm just going to cut these up, weld this thing together, do the top bar, cut this out, and then we're going to come in with another container. And the reason I want to cut this out, I think it's going to be too hard to set two containers together and then try to cut the insides out while they're together. I think it's easier just to cut this out, this wall out here, and then bring another one in, and then cut the other one while it's in place, because you have this open and you can take your plates out there. So anyway, that's phase 2. Stay tuned, stay safe. Ciao.